Yeah, we're good.
All right. And I believe we are recording too. So, well, good morning to you. Today we'll be diving into assessing and making a congregational plan for carbon reduction. There's a lot of resources within the Mennonite Church for this and adjacent to it. And I'll also touch on some more actions that we can be taking individually as well. But first, I want to share just a little bit of my background and how I got to this work. I'm a Lancaster native. I go to East Chestnut Street Mennonite in the city. My professional training is as an engineer, but I've been doing a lot of different work in climate innovation for the last 10 or 15 years, really trying to figure out how do we actually move communities of people forward to get the work done that we need to do. My day job is as a manager for the fledgling regenerative ag department at Team Ag, an agricultural consultancy, and I'll kind of share how I got there, and also starting a nonprofit called Regenal that's focused on regeneration for regions, so rural and urban communities together. And I've also joined the board at PAIPL, which is an excellent resource for these types of things for communities. I am a husband and father of two small buddies that are a big motivator for me to be involved in this work. So that's a bit of my background. I really got here through sustainability and the increasingly worse IPCC reports, which you're well aware of, that by 2030, we basically need to cut our emissions in half. And then by 2050, all nations need to do that across the board completely. And you can see there the graph of our cumulative global emissions that keep going up pretty much exponentially without any sign of tailing off or starting. Yet, despite that, we have a lot of solutions, and we know what we could do. If you're not familiar with Project Drawdown, I'll emphasize it a couple times through the presentation today. I love the work that they've done to really take a look at what's the spectrum of solutions that we would need to deploy globally, and the magnitude of each one of those. And I think looking at this, there's some powerful takeaways, that there's some big wins, but there's a lot of diversity in them. There's just a lot of different things that we have to do. I haven't found the Mennonite term for the silver bullet, but there isn't one. There's just a lot of things that we need to do, but there are some important takeaways from this. One that's really struck me is that of the top 20, 12 of those are land and food related. So to me, it says that we need to have our rural communities as deeply engaged in climate work as urban communities. And traditionally, it's been a kind of urban response thing. That's one of the things that has led me into work in agriculture. So my day job is helping farmers to write regenerative farm plans to really connect conservation and economic resilience for their farms, improving soil health on their farms, decreasing cost of inputs, but also accessing new markets for regenerative products. That's one of the things that I think has a lot of potential, especially here in central Pennsylvania with our small farm sizes. So another project that we've been doing is taking those drawdown solutions and recalculating them for Lancaster. So what would it look like if we began to imagine solutions at a smaller scale that we can actually, relate to and understand the magnitude of solutions there. So this is where that nonprofit Regenal has come from. And what we want to do is really help individuals and communities and businesses to do inventories of their greenhouse gas emissions, and be able to offset them and put a sign in your yard that says we're carbon neutral, and as you implement the projects, but also create opportunities to buy carbon offsets that fund local projects. So for the things that you're not able to offset, to fund projects with an eye on climate and environmental justice in our communities, that sequester carbon or avoid emissions. So that's some of the work that we're doing there. I think Lancaster is just such an interesting microcosm and place to do this work, because it's just the right size, I think, where you can have you can understand what's going on. Our rural and urban population demographics match the US to like 1/100%. So I think Lancaster is really interestingly representative of the rest of the US. It's a place that people know and recognize. It's close to major metro areas. And we've already made a lot of environmental progress, especially in water. So I think Lancaster is just a really fascinating place, where if we brought forward big goals for carbon neutrality, that it's a place where it would actually mean something if we did it. Everybody expects California to do these things. People don't expect Lancaster to do these things. And the example and model of that, I think, could be really powerful. So one of the big hurdles that I saw to that was agriculture. That's why I plugged in there, but also faith communities standing in the way of some of that. And that's one of the things that led me to be connected and involved with Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light, which is a really awesome interfaith group that provides resources for faith communities that want to have a response to climate change. But it's also what gets me involved in stuff like this today. So that's just a quick background of where I come from and why I'm here. But today I want to focus on some of the things that we can do individually, things that we can do together, and some of the organizations that exist to help. So starting off with individual actions, I think we can continue to learn more about climate change, and from our initial conversations, I know you all are already steeped in these topics, but hopefully I can give a couple new places to turn to really also know your impact, study solutions, then keep experimenting, keep doing new things in your home and in your life, and then also to be practicing hope about a really large and challenging idea that I think has really paralyzed us as a society. So first, learning about climate change. There are numerous books. I chose to list a couple films that have been really great summaries for me about climate, that give just a really quick intro about where we are, why it's a challenge, and help to connect you with stories of real people who are on the front lines affected by this. So these are some great resources, and I can make the presentation and I think the video of this available after as well. Then second, I talked about knowing your own personal impact. Really trying to figure out how to inventory and understand your own impact. I think this can go a number of ways. I think a lot of people can get trapped in the guilt of this. You can also get sucked into the minutia of trying to influence like little things, and that becomes your entire focus. Or you can also think like, I'm doing this thing, but nobody else is, so what's the point? But I think it's an important exercise to know where you are and what's going on. You can of course look at your utility bills and water bills and figure out quantities of things. I included, this is a tool called Sense Energy that can clip onto your main panel board and really show it recognizes patterns of things. So like it figures out that this is the signature in the noise of a refrigerator. So, it's able to disaggregate your power usage and figure out, where those sources are coming from. Just to really, you don't have to throw more tech at tech problems. But if you're going to, it's a kind of interesting tool. I also think it's really interesting to know equivalencies and to know like how much is this, because and this is for individuals, for congregations, for everything. The EPA has a great calculator that allows you to enter a fuel or an emissions that and it shows you, well, that's equal to this or this or this, how many miles driven, or rail cars worth of coal burned here, so you can start to understand the scale of the things. So many of these numbers are just huge amorphous numbers, and it gives some tangibleness to that. Another thing that might be new is called open source map, which is just a really interesting thing to dive more into the products that you buy and where they come from. So like this is an iPhone. This is the global supply chain for an iPhone. And it shows different levels of where the materials are, whether it's a supplier, manufacturer, distributor, or retailer, and shows how this thing that you have in your hand travels all around the world, and all these parts are interconnected in these ways. And it's wild to look through different examples of this for some products that are so simple and so everyday, yet traveled farther than you ever have in your life. And I think it's a interesting way to like come to terms with the globally interconnected economy that we have. I think it's also really important to immerse yourself in solutions. I definitely take an optimistic, like a climate optimist view in this, which certainly has its critique, and we're in a desperate situation, and there's not necessarily a normal that we can aspire to in the future that's been anything like anything in the past. But I think it's important to really understand the possibility of solutions to address current challenges. The Reversing Climate Change podcast by Nori is phenomenal. I've listened to all of them, and it's just a really great way to dive into stories with people who are really working on this every day, and learn more about solutions that exist. Also, the Project Drawdown work is excellent at a global level to show this is what we would have to do, this is what's possible. And then as you're studying all these things, to keep doing things, whether it's physical changes to your home like insulation or solar panels, or more behavioral things like this is 2 years worth of trash that a woman collected in a jar. I know for certain at breakfast we generated more than that. So there's ways that you can quickly become an insufferable person by doing this. But I think experiments like this are really important to be able to understand the magnitude of what you're engaged in. And then also I wanted to share ways to practice hope. So this is a book by Joanna Macy that we've used quite a bit at Interfaith Power and Light, and people are hosting sessions around this. Also, another book that I've really liked is called The Future We Choose, where half of the book is written in the future and helping us to really connect with the future that could be. And I think that's such a critical thing to be able to practice as we're dwelling in the present of what is, to imagine imagine a future world. So those are some of the things that we can do individually, and I know that you're already engaged in a lot more of those. But I want to move now into some of the things that we can do together as our communities of faith. I'll share a bit of our experience from the Creation Care Committee at East Chestnut Street Mennonite Church. One of the things that we did, I believe back in 2007, was to implement a gas tax, so a voluntary gas tax that individuals charge themselves. And, you know, it's not a major thing in the congregational life or space or anything like that. I don't know what percentage of people do it, but over the years, it's generated a lot of money for the Creation Care Committee to do many of the projects that you'll see here. So funds are put in the offering and earmarked for creation care projects. So it's a separate fund of money, and people practically just keep a log like this in their car, and when they fill up, you know, add this number of gallons. So from 2007 to 2021 or 2021, these are some of the different projects that we've been involved with at the church. They stretch from facilities to more like cultural things to things in the neighborhood. But we did an energy audit, and a lot of things flowed out of that. We really took a lot. Edgar, you were talking about the land and importance of the space that the church is physically located on. There were different trees. There's not as much with East Chestnut Street in the city, but we focused on trees with the city there and different rain barrel projects. But then just trying to integrate a lot of this work into what we do all the time for fellowship meals with reusable plates. And we've had several rounds of climate or environmentally related second hour classes or electives. Then also things that are just as tangible, simple as switching the power sourcing from the church to renewable energy. And then engaging things beyond the church in the neighborhood. We do have a decently large footprint. You know, the rubber roofs stretches not just from the church facility itself, but we have a number of properties along East Chestnut Street that we've installed white rubber roofs on to lower the heat island impact, but also planting trees in the neighborhood. We were able to install electric car charging stations, and there's lots of different ways that we've gotten young people and the rest of us involved in river cleanups and other projects. So recognizing that our rootedness in the community connects us to many other things. So here are just a couple of the photos from those projects in this work. But, you know, it's been something that we kind of do as we're able. We have a Creation Care Committee that meets monthly, and project ideas kind of roll out of that, and out of some of the core things like the energy audit that start to outline more of a plan over the years. You likely know Marlisa Yoder-Bontrager, who provided some of the information for the East Chestnut Street section of these slides. She's a former Mennonite Creation Care Network council member and also with us on the Creation Care Committee. These are some of the takeaways that she's put together as she presents this work to other congregations, but that there's a lot of opportunities to collaborate within different committees and organizational structures within the church. and that it's like I said, with the Creation Care Committee, you need to have a group of people that's owning this idea and meeting frequently to keep it moving forward. There's lots of different ways. I'll show some of the curricula that different groups connected with the church have put together. And it's just important to give people really practical, this is something you can do, and different hands-on activities to engage across the generations at the church. I believe one of our important roles as a church is to be generating hope around such an overwhelmingly tough issue, to be the squeaky wheel in the congregation that's keeping to bring attention back to this issue. Some of the projects are big and some are small, and it's important to not discount the small stuff because it can help build momentum and engagement. And often there's funding available for this stuff too. So we got funding from the Mennonite Creation Care Network for the car chargers, and also from the VW settlement helped to fund that, in addition to the revenue from the gas tax. So a couple different tangible ways that we've had the money to do some of this work. So I wanted to share then 3 of the organizations that exist within the church to really bolster some of this work. First is the Center for Sustainable Climate Solutions, formed in a collaboration between Goshen and EMU and something else. But it's a really phenomenal resource. Katie Isaac, who was going to present this session with me back a year and a half ago when we signed up for it, pulled together a lot of this information here. It's a little bit tricky to find, but it is in the drop down and the main navigation panels on the website. This is the direct link to it. But these are some of the cumulative resources that they have there. You can also fill out a quick survey on the site that helps to see where your congregation is, and then gives you targeted recommendations for what you can do next from that starting point. I can't say enough about how many resources there are here, like an overwhelming amount of resources of different groups that you can plug into, like several afternoons of sitting and sifting through the information here. But there's a lot out there, is kind of what I want to say. And this is a portal for finding that. Another one within the Mennonite Church is the Mennonite Creation Care Network. They have some really phenomenal curriculums for the Every Creature Singing, for engaging climate change and environmental work as a congregation. Also, this is sort of a similar focusing tool as the CSCS surveys, where you can kind of figure out what you've done of these different high level ideas, and that filters you into different resources that they have available for climate action planning at the church level. They also offer every year net zero energy grants. This is what I was saying. East Chestnut Street has gotten this 1,800 for car charging stations, but any MCUSA congregations that are willing to craft and engage in an ongoing plan. So it's not just a single one-off project, but you are engaged in this ongoing work toward net zero, makes you eligible but it's designed for hardware purchases, like solar, or the car charging stations that we've done. Those applications need to be submitted between end of April and in June of every year. And then I'd already mentioned Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light. So we do a lot of advocacy work. So it's a good way to be plugged into state level advocacy updates and what opportunities are there. Every year there's been a bike ride that's also an advocacy idea, where we've been going to DC and meeting with our Congress members, and have built a really great connection to them by doing that for 10 years. But there's also, I showed the Active Hope and different spiritual resources that are available, trainings on all kinds of different creation care aspects. Creation care is listed here, is a number of our members do like native species work in the forest, and will gladly lead groups out to be working on that. But maybe most importantly, it's a network to connect to like-minded congregations and faith communities across the state that are all engaged in this work. And one of the things that we're doing right now is working to set up chapters across the state. So I've been really interested to get one of those going here in Southeast PA, South Central, in Lancaster, because there's just so much that we can learn from each other as different communities are in different stages with different ideas. So that's a bit about PAIPL. There's also a tool called the Cool Congregations Calculator that really allows you to dive into more of the inventory analysis, so you know where you are. I think this is probably the most developed like calculator tool from the different organizations that I mentioned, that would allow you to really kind of strategically figure out where we are as a congregation or facility. I also have a couple ideas that we've hit on a number of these through it, but the Ever Creature Singing curriculum is excellent. At East Chestnut Street, I just led a session with a couple other people in back when we were meeting together, on this Climate Church, Climate World book from Jim Omtal, which isn't exactly from a Mennonite perspective, but a really wonderful book for justifying why congregations are a perfect place to be doing this kind of climate action. I think it's probably a good introduction to that if your congregation isn't all in on that as a focus. And then I've mentioned Drawdown maybe too many times today, but it's great. So it's a wonderful book to be inspired with hope. So a few closing thoughts from me. I think congregations are such an interesting place where different people still get together and form a community. And as the political polarization in our world continues to deepen, I think this is such a unique and important thing that we can't forget or lose sight of. I think in regards to climate, our congregations are also a really important moral voice. And so I think it's a valuable place to be speaking of why we need to do this kind of work as society, and churches can hold that banner and be listened to by by our leaders. I think at their best, communities are also really great places to encourage each other within a community, to keep moving forward and creating a culture where these sorts of things are happening. And then finally, I was at the National Cathedral for their Earth Day service a number of years ago, and my regret was that Wendell Berry was at the first service and I went to the second service. But the second service guy was still good, and I used the thing that he was saying all the time, where none of the people that were alive for putting the first stone down for the National Cathedral were alive when the last one was laid. And I think there's a really important takeaway from that with the role of the church in climate conversations, that when everything else in the world is so instant, the church is still a place that can focus on some of these longer term things. And with climate, we're still looking at like a 10 to 15 year window of where we have the greatest opportunity to impact the most necessary change. Not like after that, it's just over. But this is such an important window still, in a news cycle that moves on in hours. That's a time horizon that's still hard to think of in many places. And I think the church is really well positioned for it. So that's the end of the prepared things that I had. So I'm happy to take questions, but I'll also put these up as different things that can maybe guide some of that conversation. What are examples of congregational climate action that have inspired you? What are some of the biggest barriers that you see within your community to climate action? And what might help your community deepen their climate commitments? So comments or questions don't have to be tied to them. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see each other again. But yeah, we have still 20 minutes to chat.
Eric, what a phenomenal overview. This has been exceedingly comprehensive.
Thanks a lot.
Yes. I just can imagine there's no end to what each of our congregations might try. Mm-hmm. Kind of like dismantling racism, right? Mm-hmm. And that's our current congregation's focus, but yep. The wheels are turning here as you speak.
Yeah. And these things are so connected, right? Like all of these things are bound together.
Yes, I said at the beginning, my sense of challenge is how to build maybe not a complete consensus, but kind of a solid foundation of congregational support to move forward with implementation of a number of things that you've mentioned. And that can be a difficult challenge for people that don't see climate change and environmental care as being a priority. And I'm thinking that that you mentioned, composting and tree planting, maybe developing a meditative garden in church's land space, or bringing your own plates to church meals and things. That should be something that is doesn't have any kind of broader political implications, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, especially in a rural, largely rural area, that those should be ethics, should be, be part of a rural lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, any thoughts along the lines or ways to move in those initial steps to get people to start valuing those kind of actions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it can be challenging, but I think especially like conservation communities here in Lancaster, I think have done a really good job of crossing those boundaries and also helping everyone to remember that it's been a lot of the conservative voices that have been the leaders in the efforts to conserve things. Yeah, I see this a lot in agriculture, where people that are deeply connected to land are very much aware of change. I've talked to some farmers that have said, it's not just different than when I started or when my grandfather farmed here. It's different than when I started 10 years ago. And that doesn't take into account responsibility or, how this was caused or how we're here. But I think our churches have an opportunity to decouple environmental and climate narratives from the larger political mainstream. And that's, I don't have cut and dry ideas for how to do that, but I just think it's really important and really unique that these are spaces where people get together despite political differences, and that's really rare right now. So ways that you can build engagement across that, I think, are super valuable right now. And it probably means starting small and going.
Well, and I'm wondering too, Keith, in your congregational setting, I'm just thinking, what would it be like to tap into the next generation and get the junior and senior youth groups excited about whatever.
Yeah, I think it's important for young people to see that there are peers, or there are respected members of their community that share some of the concerns that they might have as well. I left a faith community because I didn't see that.
On another kind of different perspective, a more personal thing, although this could be used church facilities as well. You mentioned scents. My wife Ruth we have scents at our house.
Okay.
And so we and also have solar panels. So we're basically over the course of the year, we end up zero electricity expense because we stack the extra power that we make, and part of the year use more than we generated other times. And over the course of the year, it pretty much goes out. So it's very possible to home or building that cumulative year has zero energy, self-generated. And thing going with sense is something called kilowatt.
Yeah.
And we've actually put that on our refrigeration units at church because they're a big drawdown just to see what their power consumption is. So for those that don't know, it's a device you can attach to a particular appliance, and it records energy use over time. And so you can find out, where are we losing? Is it air conditioning? Is it, heating? Is it the refrigeration?